Okay? Starting for English 201. Don't go away yet, please. How do we stop it? Pause. Okay, here we go then, people. First, in terms of planning, we have our planners, don't we? What's our next big goal? The essay, the short essay. When do I want it? Just before the midterm exam or just after, immediately when we come back. Yes? Okay. How many pages? 3 to 3.5. What are we talking about first when it has to do with our midterm exam? Are we looking at a possibility for the last day of the midterm exam, namely October 23rd? Yes or no? How will that go? We can look at our math and other big courses where lots of us are involved and tell me what those lecturers are saying. We don't want to have 3 exams on one day. That's the point. Okay? So keep me informed, please. But our tentative date would then be the 23rd, the day before the midterm break. Fair enough? I would also like essay number 1 on the day of the midterm exam or immediately when we come back after the break, which would be the 30th, when I see you after the midterm break. Yes? Either time would be fine. If you need help with your thesis paragraphs only, you should get them to me by a week from today, Friday. Yes, which would be what date? Friday the 4th, yes? Or over that weekend, not before Sunday, not after Sunday night. In other words, I ideally like to get back to people on a Sunday night, yes? So if you send them to me on Friday the 4th or Saturday the 5th, I can get back to you on the Sunday night, which is the 6th. Fair enough? Okay. I only want your thesis paragraphs. And as we know, the thesis paragraphs are the hardest things to write. They are argumentative, as we know from English 101 and 102, but they are also what? Comprehensive. They're summarizing. In other words, they're an attempt to do what is probably almost impossible. Namely what? Nail down the main message of the entire piece of writing in one paragraph. Oh, yes. Okay. Do I have to, this thing has changed. Does anybody know why? Do I have to agree with all your views on the thing? Huh? It's still recording. Oh. Red bar on top? Yeah. Yes. It's still recording. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Do I have to agree with all your views on the particular work or works that you are looking at? No. But do I have to hear it? Do you have to make it clear? Absolutely clear. Have we all gotten our essay topics? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Can I borrow somebody's own then to read them to us and make a few points? Yeah? These are the extras. Thank you, dear. Here we are. Okay. First, it says topics for essay number 1. On the day of the upcoming midterm exam or on our first day back after the midterm break. Now, we will still negotiate the midterm exam date, but I have a feeling that, well, how time has proven it to me, is the later the better, when you get the other big headache things out of the way and, you're feeling calmer. Okay, so it could be the 23rd, our exam date. Okay, no excuses will be accepted, no later. Have we come to the end of the line with the absenteeism and the excuses? Yes. Have I had a chat with the guidance department Yes, to find out which game is being played when it comes to absenteeism, which games are played. Yes, the truth is your lecturers are not as dumb as we seem. Yes. You know that song that says, I ain't quite as dumb as I seem? Okay. Yes. Thank you very much. Okay. So, okay, can we get 4 o'clock then? Thank you very much. It's working. Okay. So the lecturers are, for me anyway, I ain't quite as dumb as I seem. So have I come, excuse me, to the end of the line with the excuses? Yes. Do we absolutely go into overdrive at this stage? Yes. Okay. I told you that you will find that we start picking up speed. And once we've finished with the Naipaul, do we have to pick up speed then? Now, the Naipaul has been a text that we've used not just for its own sake, but for doing what? For recognizing important relationships between form and content and important aspects of form or structure, such as, for instance, voice. Yes? Okay. Now, do we then use what we've observed with regard to the Naipaul in regard to other things? Our poems, for instance. Are there voices in our poems? Of course. By now, have we all read all the items in the portfolio, which we got, I think, 3 weekends ago? Yes, we should have. I told you you needed to use the time for the reading. Okay. Well, whatever it is. 2 weekends were a lot. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Sorry, this is about one of the essay questions. Where it says, discuss the depiction of the image of female as seen on this post. Do you mean in the book or the poems as well?
Can we come to that in a minute? Because are there going to be topics that move us beyond the book? Yeah. Okay. Let's have a look then. It says 3.5 pages, but no less than 3. This is a short essay. Is there a hero in Miguel Street? Now, when the topic asks us a question, do we have to address that question in our opening paragraph? Because part of the challenge is what? Answering the question. Isn't that the truth? Is there a hero in Miguel Street? Some people might say yes, it's Hat, but he is a kind of failing hero, what the French call the hero manqué, yes? Or maybe, no, there is not a hero, but there is a heroine. If so, who is it? Which character? Does this mean it is still working? Yes or no? You sure? Which button? This? We don't want to turn it off.
Is there still a red bar?
No.
Slide your finger across.
Here?
Yeah. Do it harder. Oh, you have to put in the password.
Please come, help.
Josh is coming to the rescue.
Josh, I would have to delete because I pressed the wrong things. Yeah?
Yep.
Press delete. Yeah?
And again.
Put these again.
No, you still have to.
They are wrong.
There you go.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
We're on the road again. Thank you. Okay. 2 points then. Are there some topics that are highly argumentative? And they will ask you a question, and the challenge is to address the question immediately. Do I have to necessarily agree with all of your views? No. But do I have to hear your views? And does your reader have to hear your view from the get-go in your opening thesis paragraph? The truth is, folks, as you may have noticed in 101 and 102, if you don't start with a strong thesis paragraph by paragraph 2, you will be on a downhill slide after that. You will lose control of the essay and you will not have a clear focus in the message you are giving your reader. So number A is there a hero in Miguel Street? Okay. Number B is discuss the use of structural elements or form and its relation to or spotlighting of content or major themes as seen in any work studied so far. Now, that one would lead us right into Miguel Street, wouldn't it? And will each individual story perhaps need to be dealt with among the 4 we spent time on? Yes, of course. Is this why we say work or works? Yes. You asked an interesting question there. Do we use the poems as well? If we're using the poems along with Miguel Street, could we find ourselves needing more pages than 3 pages? Probably. Okay. If you want to, however, do that, what should you do? Include it in your opening thesis paragraph that for purposes of this essay, I will use the following texts. And text can mean poems as well. Fair enough? Discuss the theme of the growth journey as seen so far on this course. Is that mainly Miguel Street? Mainly. Yes, because does each chapter, each story we have done, in a sense, detail for us a different chapter in the growth journey of the boy? Yes. And each of these fascinating and shocking characters, especially the women, yes, that we met, can be seen as what? Milestones along the growth journey. You shook your hand. Is it Heather? Sarah. Heather? Sarah. Sorry. You shook your head when I said, is the growth journey directly related to Miguel Street? You shook your head because you had other ideas. Please tell us.
No, I didn't have other ideas. I thought I misheard what you said. I thought you said, is it only in Miguel Street?
Thank you. Is it only in Miguel Street? No. You are right. And what other ideas, what other work that we studied crosses your mind that maybe you would even give a paragraph to that? The growth journey. For my mother, may I inherit half her strength. Does the writer tell us at the beginning, my mother loved my father. I say this in my 30th year, and age 30 is supposed to be a turning point, yes. The year to discard all absolutes. Exactly. In a sense, does she portray her mother with different levels of emotion as she grows older? Yes or no? Remember Mark Twain, the writer of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn? He, was a hilarious, ironic speaker. And he is quoted as having said, well, when he was a boy, he thought his father was so stupid, so dumb. And then when he was in his 20s, he thought, well, maybe his father had a point or two. Somewhere around the 20s, I guess. And then in his 40s, he thought his father was a very wise man. In other words, as we progress through time in our own life journey, do we perceive life and our loved ones in quite different ways? Mm-hmm. So, for my mother, may I inherit half her strength, could also not just be telling us about the mother's life, but is it telling us about the first person narrator's life as well, the one who says I? Is she seeing her mother in different ways by the end of the poem? By the end of the poem, she sees her mother very much as the victim, doesn't she? In the beginning, she sees her mother as the Amazon, the worker, the nurturer, the caretaker, the teacher, the one who judges their quarrels and their conflicts, yes? Sit in judgment, etc. So, okay, so Sarah, you might be interested in that, yes? Okay. The theme, discuss the depiction of women or the image of the female as seen so far on this course. The lady over there in black, you said, sorry, what's the name again there?
Cheyenne.
Sorry?
Cheyenne.
Sorry?
Cheyenne.
Cheyenne. Okay. What came to your mind immediately you read that? You asked me, should it only be Miguel Street? Why?
Yeah, no, because, I mean, in the essays, it talks about other women, but it's like the same thing basically. I think it covers the Caribbean women, so that's why I asked.
In other words, you found in the essays, Young Bulls on the Loose and the Feminine Principle, a lot about women too. And then, of course, in For My Mother May I Inherit Half Her Strength and Poem for Mothers, a lot about women too. So, are you going to probably find yourself, definitely find yourself tempted to go beyond Miguel Street and probably beyond 3.5 pages too? Fine. Send me your thesis paragraph and, we can hammer it out. Yes? Does it mean this thing is still working? Okay. Hope so. Okay. Then, of course, the use and impacts of irony as seen in any work studied on this course so far. We've talked a lot about irony, haven't we? And how irony forces us to think outside the box. Excuse me. So, will that one definitely refer to ironic tone in the use of the storyteller, the storytelling voice in Miguel Street? But will it also refer to irony in content, in themes, and in happenings? It's ironic, isn't it, that the person we see initially as the victim, Mrs. Herrera, in Love, Love, Love Alone, by the end of the events of the story, we don't see her as a victim anymore. We actually see her as a bit of a con artist, an abuser of her husband and her marriage, yes? And so on down the line. Okay, so here we are. We need to start thinking ahead. Then we have some handouts which you may have gotten before on an individual level, but do we need to go back to them? Reminders for better essay and project writing. These are oldies but goodies. Will somebody please hand out? Josh, if you sit in the front, this will happen. And if you're the only man in the room, thank you, it will happen. Thank you. Okay, now we said at the beginning that the Easy Writer was a good investment book. Yes? Okay, so you will find comments on how to set up quotations there. But are we going to give ourselves a migraine headache about those? No. Right? Because am I interested at this point in how you establish a view, a thesis, and how you develop that view? A warning, my friends. If you press the button on internet looking for Naipaul, out will jump an avalanche of critical essays and critical views. Take my foolish advice and do not read a word of these until you have nailed down your own point of view. Is this very, very, thank you, important to do? I've found that the internet, reading all these critical essays can absolutely brainwash myself. Yes? To the point where I forgot what was my first view or my first reaction when I read the poem or the essay or the stories. Besides, there's this thing called plagiarism, which can happen almost automatically if we allow ourselves to be sufficiently brainwashed by what comes out of internet. So therefore, it's not a research essay. Yes? It's a critical essay. And what do I want then? I want you to get in the habit of nailing down your own response. Can you then, when you have finished writing the essay, go to internet and see perhaps what other famous critics have said? Yes. But my advice is if you start with internet, you will find it almost impossible to isolate your own view. These critics are very good at brainwashing us. Okay. Yes, there.
For the thesis paragraph, does the top of sentence have to be the first sentence?
No.
Oh, okay.
Of course not. But my advice is your thesis paragraph must come as either paragraph 1 or paragraph 2, or you will lose control of the writing. It's very easy for that to happen, okay? Thank you. Then, what's our next biggie? We're going to first finish our discussion of the Golden Wife and the folk story tradition. But do I have one more thing for us, one more challenge? Of course I do. Here we are, Nettleford. Do we have a big quiz on the Nettleford, which I will collect from you, thank you, next Friday? And the absentees may be able to listen to this if I find a way to send it to them on their iPads. But I'm not taking responsibility for any absentees from here on, full stop. I've had a chat with the people in counseling, and I've had a chat with my fellow lecturers. And it seems as if the chronic absentees play the same games on all of these dummy lecturers, who, however, are not as dumb as we seem. Okay, thank you. And here are extra copies of the Nettleford in case we need it, because we're going to do a bit of a breakdown on it together after this. If you need an extra copy of the Nettleford, don't feel shy. Here it is. Okay? Thank you. Let us continue then, my friends. We left off last time talking about the Golden Wife, and we were supposed to have it read, thank you very much, for this class. Yes? Now, interestingly, the Golden Wife, of course, gives us a very reliable example, doesn't it, of major aspects of the folk story tradition. You had your hand up there? Okay. Now, what do I mean by this? Last time we spoke about the folk story tradition, and we said that the folk story tradition, of course, has some very typical aspects, recognizable aspects attached to it. Can we list any of those? Did we go back over our notes from last time? Yes or no? I hope. Yes or no, folks? What is it about the folk story tradition that made it stand out in our memories? Huh? Sorry? Often the belief in superstition and voodoo, yes. What else? Coming from a non-technologically developed society, yes. Morals and values being what? Passed down from one generation to the next. Often these are what? Also culturally important messages. Yes? Did we have the themes of justice and retribution also coming across very clearly to us, not just in the Golden Wife, but on our list of aspects of your typical folk story? Now, there's this man called Roger Abrams. Yes, I think you spell, I'm not sure how you spell the name, so look up both if you're interested in checking. It's called the African American or the Afro-American folk tale. Yes? And he brings us into the deep end of the folk story tradition. Yes? Folk tale. Why do I say that? Because, of course, okay, if we say, for instance, that folk stories give us, they're very intent on passing on values and moral lessons, moral teachings. Yes? And one of the moral teachings that they give us is, of course, what goes around comes around. And therefore, justice and retribution will naturally emanate from seeing life in this way. But can we also say then that the folk stories present life as a circle? Yes. And it is a circle then that some people speak of as a karmic experience or karma. That we will reap what we sow. Life goes around in a circle. It's a circle. It's a cycle. And as they put it, for instance, in the Bahamas, where Miss Linton comes from, what goes around comes around. Okay. I don't see the red line up there. Is it still recording? Yes. Okay. So then, if life is then to be seen as a cycle and a circle, and what goes around, good afternoon, sit there please, by the door. Yes. And if what goes around comes around, is it then true that one of the lessons to be learned from seeing life as a circle is what? That there is such a thing as justice and retribution, because we do reap what we sow. Now, did we see that theme of justice and retribution coming across clearly to us in the story that I told you to read, and we talked about it last time a little bit? Yes, the golden wife. Does anybody want to tell us in what sense did we see justice and retribution coming across to us? The death of the man. Was he revealed as in any way beautiful? No, clearly not. Okay, was there a lesson then to us as readers about so-called beauty? Yes, of course. Okay, so in terms of the life lessons, are we looking at several important things? Please see me afterwards. Okay, now one of the life lessons then, in regard, the obvious life lesson from this work is what?
What goes around comes around.
You reap what you sow. What goes around comes around. So be careful what you do. It will come back to you. Yes. Did we get another message about beauty? Beauty is only skin deep. And is this message conveyed to us in a way that seems like what we might call a human universality? Yes? Okay. Now, in other words, but is this story, of course, it's based in a small island in the Caribbean, in the Bahamas. Yes? But is it a story that in actual fact has a kind of universal significance for us? Yes. Is the theme of beauty very real? Okay. For those of us in social sciences, can we look, for instance, at some recent, fairly recent, relatively recent works on beauty? This one called The Beauty Myth by a writer called Naomi Wolf. Yes? For those of us who later on think that we might be working on images of women, like you over there, my friend, because I have a feeling this topic will keep exploding for you. Of course, will the beauty issue come in? Naomi Wolf then wrote this big blockbuster book, research as well as analysis, called The Beauty Myth. And was she looking at beauty as a form, a kind of national obsession and a national myth in America? Yes, but also a form of a national entrapment. Yes? Okay, then of course, is there another one? Yes? Susan Faludi. Susan Faludi. Her big book was Backlash, the Undeclared War Against American Women. Or against women in America, whatever. If you look up Faludi, Faludi, you'll be surprised. Now, this woman is actually quite an ironist. For those of us who like irony, you will love her tone. But does she talk about beauty as a trap and a false image that is imposed on American women? And does she talk about what she calls the beauty industry, which is, of course, this multi-billion-dollar industry that keeps growing every second, yes? And includes the plastic surgery industry, which, as she points out, has outpaced the baby delivery industry. That most baby doctors do not have as many clients as plastic surgeons do. Okay, so there we are then, folks. Is this then another aspect of the story by Glinton, the theme of beauty? Does Glinton then, in a sense, invite, almost force us to do a deeper, more thoughtful examination of what beauty is and what it is not? Those of us who are interested in literature and the British novel, of course, may have heard of Oscar Wilde's essay. It's not an essay, it's a novel actually, but some of it lends itself to the essay style, The Picture of Dorian Gray. Now that has been made into at least 3 movie versions, and about 2 years ago, not quite 2 years ago, you had a version of it, Dorian Gray was all it was called. Yeah, The Picture of Dorian Gray, and this is by the very famous, many times published British writer Oscar Wilde. Now obviously then, this theme of beauty is not something that is limited to modern times, yes? In other words, it's obviously something that is at the psychological center of many societies and cultures. And does our story by Glinton get that point across to us? That there is much more to beauty than meets the eye. Be careful how we swallow the beauty myth, in other words. Okay, now coming back to aspects of the folk story. Last time we said the folk story was rooted in a non-technologically developed society. It was passed down by word of mouth from one generation to the next, yes? It usually passed on values, moral values, as well as cultural values, yes? It often used irony, not just irony in storytelling tone, but irony in events and content, happenings and messages, yes? It showed life as a circle. In other words, it revealed what some people call karma, exactly. It showed life as a circle, and they gave us the message that what goeth around cometh around, and we reap what we sow. And of course, between the lines then gave us a warning that we should be careful what we do, because it will come back to us. Does that also bring an echo of the Chinese expression, be careful what you want, you may get it? And the American addition to it, be careful what you want, you may get it, and it may get you? Yes. You know what the Americans mean when they say it's going to get you. Okay. Then, of course, do we also have the aspect that says what? There are such things as symbols and archetypes that tend to have a universal significance. Now, Roger Abrams argues in that book, The African American or the Afro-American Folktale, that in actual fact, the issue of archetypes versus stereotypes is very, very important in the folk story tradition. What does he mean? We know we said last time that we have lots of symbolic characters in folk stories. Go back into time, you have the Anansi figure, yes, the trickster, who represents greed and trickery. You might almost say that he was an early version of what the criminologists and psychologists today call the psychopath. Yes, way ahead of society, but always ripping off society somehow. Then in the Bahamas, from which the Glinton story comes, you have the figures, as we said last time, the Buki and Berabi figures. Yes. Then think in terms of a lot of British inheritances. We have folk stories like the fox and the hare, and the tortoise and the hare, yes. The rabbit and the turtle, yes, and so on. And we notice that animal characters are often highly symbolic of what? Human behaviors. Exactly. Now, do these writers often use not just the animal characters, but the symbolic characters to represent different, very recognizable and commonplace, recurring personality types, of course, and behavior patterns, yes. But the question then is, do they reinforce stereotypes, or do they convey human archetypes that have a universal relevance or application? In other words, this guy, Abrams, says that the best of the folk stories actually reinforce and convey to us archetypal models of human behavior. In other words, these are classic models of human behavior that in fact do have a timeless and universal significance. Now, if you look up the word archetype in the dictionary, our best friend, we're going to find that most dictionaries will tell you something like what? That the archetype is the original model from which all copies can be reliably made. Yes. Okay. It is, in other words, neutral. It's not biased. But what is it about the stereotype that we learned from English 10102? The stereotype is that unpleasant combination of the sweeping generalization, the gross generalization of some kind, and what else? False assumptions thrown in, yes, but above all, bias and prejudice of some kind. In other words, the stereotype not only passes on bias or prejudice, it reinforces it. Now, Abrams' argument about folk stories and the folk story tradition is that the worst of the folk stories actually indulge in stereotyping. They reinforce stereotypes. But that the best, and we can infer from that then, that the best of the folk stories will do what? Challenge stereotypes. Does this make sense? Yes or no? When I say that, did anybody think of any way in which we saw a challenge to any stereotype happening in The Golden Wife? We read it. Sorry?
Women are weak at the end. She transferred to burn and kill them.
one of the stereotypes is that women are the weaker sex, that women are weak. But you're pointing out that this so-called beautiful woman transformed herself into a golem and devoured the man, killed him. Quite quickly and efficiently too. Yes? Exactly. Thank you. Any other stereotype that we found was being challenged in this story? I brought you a copy. You were to read it this week. You were not to come back here without having read it. Any other stereotypes that we found being challenged?
That some manners just plant their seeds and never grow, but he couldn't even produce a child with his wife.
Well, he couldn't, the idea that some men in the Caribbean simply move around, planting their seeds all over the place, so to speak, to use an analogy. Yes? But this man who thought he was a Superman couldn't even do that. Yes? Irony. Through irony, which stereotype was not only challenged but exploded? We've talked about it today. The stereotype of what beauty is. Sorry? Beauty, yeah, exactly. Does the stereotype of beauty get totally not only challenged but exploded in this story?
And more than one instance, it's like got multiple instances.
Multiple instances, for example, Josh?
Both the guy and the girl, like she turns into a huge ugly bird and he is like the worst personality towards all the girls.
He's cruel. He's just a horrible person. Yes? There's nothing beautiful about him. The narrator tells us, the all-seeing, all-knowing narrator tells us that this young man was seen by the mothers and the girls of the village, the island village, as being so beautiful, so desirable. Yes? The mothers and the grandmothers and the aunties were always baking cakes and puddings for him, etc. Yes? And no doubt they did baked crabs and all these lovely things that they do in the Bahamas, yes? In Bahamas Islands. Mm-hmm. And what was he known to have done? He actually does what? He leaves some of the girls at the altar. He promises to marry them, lets the grandmas and so on arrange the wedding, and he doesn't turn up. In other words, does he come across as not beautiful, but in actual fact, emotionally and morally ugly? Is he the emotional and psychological and sexual predator? Yes or no? Does he destroy the self-esteem of the girls on the island? Yes, of course. So when we look at the ironic conflict between his image in the eyes of the islanders and what we actually see him doing, his actions, does the irony point out to us what beauty certainly is not? Yes or no? In other words, does Clinton use the story to do what? To explode stereotypes of beauty. And of course, is there another Bahamian writer who talks about the concept of the Golem? Her name is Helen Clonaris, and if you look it up on internet, I think you should still find her website. What does she say? That traditionally, in a great deal of mythology, yes, and folk tales, the outsider figure, the newcomer, the outsider, the foreigner, so to speak, is the person in these stories who represents what? A new way of seeing things or doing things, or who represents enlightenment, change. Does the Golem, in an ironic way, bring a positive change to the island? Yes or no? Does she relieve the islanders of this predatory, horrible young man? Does she relieve them of the myth of beauty that he was beautiful? Yes or no? Does she liberate them? In other words, is the foreigner, the outsider, the person who brings a breath of fresh air, so to speak? Does she often bring, or he often bring, liberating change? Yes. So, is the ending of the story really that tragic? They have been liberated from this predator, this sexual and emotional predator that they thought was representing beauty. Have they been enlightened? Yes or no? Of course. Is this then part of the role of the outsider figure? Who is the Goblin? The beautiful woman in disguise, the trophy wife. Okay, what else does Clonaris say? That the outsider figure, traditionally in mythology and folk stories, can also represent what? Enlightenment, vision. A new vision, a new way of seeing things. Is this what the Goblins bring? Remember, we are told that what? They start with his eyes. They pecked out his eyes first, then they tore him apart. Yes or no? Uh-huh. Can I borrow somebody's? Okay? Okay. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Is the ending of that story significant? Remember, we are hearing it through the voice of this all-seeing, comprehensive, third-person narrator. Remember, our third-person storytelling voice is what? Comprehensive, all-seeing, and emotionally detached. Yes? Okay. But does it have also an edge of intimacy? As if we're still talking to these friends of ours around the campfire after dinner, that we associate with a first-person narrator. Yes? Okay. What does it say? They picked up the man, and page 148, we quoted it last time, enraged, it's the last paragraph of the story, enraged the great birds pecked at his eyes, tore his clothing, and finally rose into the air, clutching the unfortunate man in their talons. Higher and higher they flew until the clouds covered their flight. Their hapless victim was never seen again. The people of the settlement claimed that he had gone to foreign parts with his wife, which was in large measure true. He's not coming back, is he? Okay, now, interestingly, are we looking at the symbolism again? Let's start with his eyes. When he had his physical vision, did he have moral or spiritual vision? No. Could he see the value of the local girls? Or was he both racist and sexist in his approach? What did he say? Her hair too picky, her foot too big. Really? Yes. Okay. So he finds himself Miss Perfect in his views. Because he thinks he is perfect and he's looking for his perfect match. But is there an irony within an irony there on different levels, I think was what you were saying, Josh. Namely what? He gets his perfect match. He is an ugly, predatory person, a monster of a kind in disguise, and is the beautiful trophy wife also an ugly, predatory, monstrous creature. The only difference is that she what? Destroys him and thereby destroys the stereotype of beauty which has kept the village people blinded. to the moral reality of this man, that he's a predator, he's a monster. Nothing beautiful about him. Yes? And that, in other words, beauty is not really a physical thing. Is that one of the messages that we get from this story through the creation of this golden wife? Okay, so does the irony speak to us then? And is the irony the method by which what happens? We get an attack on the stereotypes of beauty, yes? And what? Not only an attack, but an explosion of the beauty stereotype, what Naomi Wolf would call the beauty myth. Does this make sense? Okay. And of course, is the theme then of life as a circle, and the theme of justice and retribution, and the message that says what goes around will come around, are all of those themes very clearly presented to us in this story. And is it also true, we said last time, that irony and symbolism were some of the recurring structures in the folk story? Do we see them working here? I mean, the golden wife is a symbol, but she also functions as a person, yes? But then she's a symbol of what? Destruction, but also liberation. Do we also get the aspect of dualism? Yes. Is there any of our other Caribbean archetypes present? You mentioned earlier, Josh, that the belief in superstition, the belief in obeah is also present. Does the man, when he is disturbed about his wife and his marriage and the lack of a baby, or good grief, oh my, does he go to his grandmother? But this is before he gets married. The grandmother tells him, "You will pick and pick till you pick a needle without eye." Is a needle without an eye of any use other than to stick you? No, exactly. But of course, this warning falls on deaf ears. Yes, when he goes to Mama Farida, the obeah woman, she works her spell and so on, and she says, "Oh my gosh, you married Bergolin?" Yes. But does he listen? Of course not. Yes? Hi.
May I speak to Leah next week?
Sure. Go ahead. So then, are we also seeing our Caribbean archetype of the belief in obeah and superstition? Yes, of course. Okay. So do we want to see this story then as a classic in the folk story genre? How many of us read it? Do we need to go back to it then? Yes. Anything else that you noticed about stereotypes that were exploded? You said the stereotype, Christina, of the woman as the weaker sex. Anything else?
And also, can one be that man doesn't always get their way? I mean, like at the beginning it seemed like if he got his way, but at the end.
Yeah, in other words, that the concept of the man as always getting his way and always being right, that one flies out the window, doesn't it? Yes.
It's like saying the stud will never win.
It's like saying the stud will never win. And do we see an analysis of the functions and destinies of the stud then in our Nettleford essay, which we were asked to read 2 weekends ago, Young Bulls on the Loose? I hope you have read it. Okay. In other words, the young men, can we move on then from the folk stories and the golden wife? Yes or no? Can we move on? Yes. Okay. You think this thing is still working? Okay. Can we then stop for a minute and the dates for the latecomers? The Nettleford quiz is due next Friday in class. The tentative date for our midterm exam is the 23rd. And as you will notice on the handout with the essays, we will hand in our first essay, the short essay, on the day of our midterm exam or our first class after the midterm exam. You know what will work out best for you. Okay? Thank you. We will not accept any late papers. Okay, can we continue? The register. Okay. We did it last time, didn't we? Can you answer loudly yes for me, please, as usual? Claudine? Yes. Today is the 27th? Okay. Claudine Matika? Cheyenne? Yes. Tonian? Thank you. Shona? Thank you. Alia? Thank you. Heather, yes. Brittany Miller? Brittany, yes, there. Natasha, late. Brittany Parsons? Thank you. Bicola, yes. Christian? Christian, thank you. Joshua, yes. Priscilla, yes. Sasha? That's you there. Julian? Yes. Just say yes for me loudly, please. Christina, yes. Jodianne, Tita, do we have classes with her? Jodianne hasn't come back. I've emailed her. Okay. Maybe she's leaving because of work pressures. Kadia, yes. Sarah, yes. Asha, that's you there. Shanice, yes. Brittany Parsons, we got you already. Okay. And Erin, yes. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving right along then, if we go to the Nettleford essay, which you should have read, any reactions to it so far from those of us who read it? Whether it had to do with the tone, this use of, does he use figurative language quite a bit? Yes or no? Yes. Yeah? Are his tones interesting? Yes or no? What about his tones? He was very critical, but how did he convey his criticism? Was he often ironic and satirical? Let me put it that way. Yes or no? He says that the West Indian man too often functions as the penis personified. You've got to admit that when you read that you laugh, whether you're a man or a woman. Yes? Yes? Okay. And does he throw us in the deep end of the gender analysis swimming pool? Before we move on, we all have reminders for better essay and project writing and presentation. You all have the essay topics with their deadlines. You have been warned. Yes. Then we all have the Nettleford quiz, which is due in a week's time, next Friday's class, when we meet again on a Friday. Are you all together on this? Consider yourself warned. No late papers will be accepted. And if you cannot come to class, send in your homework. Are we all together on this? Okay, anybody else? Somebody wrote on the paper that you lent me, ironic. Is irony a powerful tone and medium? Yes or no? Yeah. We've seen it a lot, haven't we? Why? Because, of course, irony is so much a part of life. Our grandmothers used to talk to us and tell us about the irony of life. All that glitters is not gold. Don't judge a book by its cover, etc., etc., etc. Is the Bible full of ironic parables, stories that we call parables, but really they're life lessons, aren't they? Yes. And most of them are ironic in their messages. Okay. So as we've said, then irony makes us think outside the box. Okay. If we're looking at classic paragraph structure in terms of the essay, going back to English 101, etc., do we keep in our minds some of the biggies? Yes or no? And what are the biggies when it comes to classic paragraph structure? In the booklet that says, Remind Us for Better Essay and Project Writing, the last page of it brings us back to English 101, classic paragraph structure. What are the things that we look for in classic paragraph structure and we expect to find in a well-written essay? It's in the booklet called Reminders for Better Essay Writing. Do you have it there? It's the last page in the booklet that says at the top, Reminders for Better Essay and Project Writing. Yeah? Come and get one. There's some extras here. Okay. Are we expecting our writers, our essay writers, then to present us with? There's one page that was blank, but have you found on the last page the one that says classic paragraph structure? Yeah. Okay. Are we all together? Yes or no?
So nothing's missing.
No, the flip side of the figurative language handout was missing, but we got that separately. The glossary of literary terms. Okay? Okay. Now, Nettleford was famous as a speaker, a very hilarious and ironic and satirical speaker. In other words, people just love listening to him. Yes? And, you could sit down and listen to him and go into fits of laughter. And then, of course, you would go away and think about it. Is that the power of satire? It makes us laugh, but it makes us think serious, critical, and analytic thoughts. Is that true? Satire. And satire can be angry or gentle. Often, satire uses irony as the base for its humor. But the difference between satire and irony is that irony is neutral, whereas satire is definitely critical. Okay, now we expect from a good essay writer that he or she will use classic paragraph structure at some stage, if not all the time. So are we going to be looking for thesis statements, topic sentences, supporting details, transitions, tone, and optionally figurative language? Yes? Now, interestingly, of course, those of us who read the essay may have noticed that he uses a lot of figurative language. Quite often, metaphors or hyperboles, sometimes, yes? And often they create kind of amusing pictures in our minds, yes? Okay, let us do what I call a breakdown of the essay, looking at its important constituent parts. In other words, what are the methods and the structures that Nettleford uses? Okay? Tie the heifer, loose the bull. So goes a popular Caribbean saying from Guyana. Is that his opening topic sentence? Does it hook our attention precisely because it uses figurative language? Tie the heifer, loose the bull. Yes or no? Yeah? Okay. The proverb refers to customary ways of raising boy children in the West Indies as compared to how girls are raised. Heifer and bull, is he then giving some supporting details used as what? Definition. If you look at our handout on classic paragraph structure, you will notice that what? Our supporting details are our additional information given by the writer to further clarify the main points he makes in his topic sentences and his thesis statements. Yes? And of course, is he giving a definition of what heifer and bull are used to mean in these proverbs? Yes, of course. Okay. And he says, these reflect an African Caribbean self-image long crafted in terms of fertility functions and narrowly specified gender roles. In other words, heifers and bulls are farm animals, yes? That the heifer is the cow, the bull is the male cow, yes? If there is such a thing, you know what I mean. That are supposed to what? Breed and produce more animals, livestock, which are capital for the farmer, yes? Thus the Guyanese proverb has become a black mother's prescription. And remember we said at the beginning the word black is not used as a pejorative or an insult in any way. But my question is, for those of us who read this essay, did we find that the analysis that he offered of these dualistic, two-sided versions of child-rearing methods, did they also refer to maybe the Spanish-speaking Caribbean as well? Are the boys prized over the girls in the Spanish-speaking Caribbean families? Yes or no? Yeah? From what you have seen? Any other observations? Okay. He says it's the black mother's prescription for how to raise protected daughters who are personally competent and primed for motherhood, while preparing sons for adventure and survival, including the survival of his own future family, as well as the survival of his mama, who, after all, brought him into the world and expects his support in her old age. It's interesting, of course, if you talk to some of these reggae singers. I met this one who wanted me to write some lyrics for him. But he told me, you know, he's putting out a record. He's putting out a new album. And he needs a mama song. Because if you want your album to sell, you've got to have a good mama song on it. He called it a mama song. In other words, that everybody listens to songs about mama. So if you want your, people to listen to your music, make sure you have a good mama song. Okay. What about this first paragraph? Do we have anything that looks sufficiently argumentative and sufficiently comprehensive that it could be qualifying as a thesis statement, an opening thesis statement? The first one, tie the heifer, loose the bull, looks like our topic sentence. Yes, there.
You can argue that girl, because girl children tend to bring home.
But the boys are prized. Remember, there was a time in China when, because of the Chinese overpopulation problem, what they call the population bomb, the Chinese leaders then made a law that said one couple, one child. And what would happen is that if parents had a baby girl and they didn't want a daughter, they would abandon the daughter, the baby daughter, in the church, on the church steps, in the hospital, in the orphanage. Some, they said, even kill the daughters because they wanted a boy child. Apparently now, there are much more boys, young men, than girls in certain places in China. There are now 3 boys for every girl. How interesting. Throughout China?
I think it's in the cities, because that's where the law was.
That's where the overcrowding was as well. Fascinating. So those who are looking for husbands should head to China. Yes. Okay. That's where the men are. Okay. Lots of choices. Okay. Is there anything that looks like a thesis statement? What about the last one? Thus the Guyanese proverb has become a black mother's, etc. Does it look like a contender at least for thesis statement? Yes or no? Mm-hmm. How many people marked it with their highlighters? It's hard to know if something is a thesis statement at the beginning, isn't it? You have to kind of read the whole thing and then digest it a bit. Yes, okay. In contrast to the threatened white male of North America, who is inclined to blame his declining influence, his endangered status, if you will, on aggressive feminism, the aggressive arms of the women's liberation movement, the Caribbean black male is never allowed to forget that he is his mother's son, and that it is her legendary maternal indulgence that lets his proverbial bull loose to roam. Is he guilty of certain stereotypes there? Is he stereotyping the white North American man? I don't think there's anything threatened about people like Donald Trump and so on, who are what? Symbolic of North American white male power and influence. You might not agree with people like Donald Trump, but when they open their mouth, everybody listens. Isn't that the truth? Yes. I think he's stereotyping there. But when it comes to the image of the black Caribbean male, that he is always made to know he is mama's boy. And he is the apple of mama's eye. Yes? Okay. On his rambles, the young bull learns to be tough and aggressive in the face of any threat to his self-esteem. Yes? To be strong even when wrong. Never say you're sorry. It's a sign of weakness. Never apologize, even when you are wrong. Is that a very common attitude among the Caribbean macho men?
Oh,
yeah. Yes or no? Yes, never say you're sorry. Even when you're so obviously wrong that it's painful. Yes, exactly. And to hone his skills to be of service to as many helpers as his mating prowess allows. Is that a euphemistic way of sugarcoating? In other words, to sleep around as much as it is humanly possible for him to do. Yet a euphemism is what? You're sugarcoating, nice way of costuming things. In short, he learns to be a man. Is he being both sarcastic and ironic there? Does he mean he learns to be what the culture and the society view as a man? Do we get the impression here that Nettleford is actually deeply concerned and critical about these false notions of manhood? Yes or no? Yes. Do we also get an image of a dangerous kind of freedom? Why is it that traditionally more Caribbean men drop out of school, end up in prison, more than women do? Now it's true that all men, if you're looking at American figures, pre-decease, they die at least 7 years earlier than all women do. But it's also true that all men in America earn more money per hour than all women do. It is notwithstanding Oprah Winfrey and such people. Yes? For every 75 cents or so that a woman typically earns, the man with the same qualifications and skills and experience will earn $1. So all men earn more money in America than all women do. But all men predecease all women. Is it also true that all men die in larger numbers from suicide and homicide than all women do? They use more successful methods of suicide. Traditionally, yes. But is it also true then that we are looking at lifestyles that are more dangerous for men and that involve more risk, more violence? Yes? Now, if we're applying some of those insights to the Caribbean, are we then looking at relationships between mothers and sons, mothers being the primary teachers of and influences on sons? Now, Easton Lee, in My Father Inside, that poem in our portfolio, shows us two different versions of fatherhood and manhood, doesn't he? The rich absentee father who replaces quality time and nurturing and the time we need to teach children values, yes? He replaces that quality time with what? Things, money. And on the other hand, the poorer father is inside the house but also inside the life of his child, yes? But are we looking at maternal influences here? And is it also true that in the Caribbean, the single mother syndrome pattern is a well-entrenched and old pattern in the family? Yes or no? For whatever reason. Okay. So we sense then that Nettleford is becoming more and more critical and more concerned. But Professor Errol Miller, a leading Caribbean educator, warns of what he calls the marginalization of the black male in today's society. Concession to an opposing view. Yes? Remember, your rebuttal is made up of your concession, its development, your refutation. Yes? And of course, what? The development of the refutation, which will reinforce the writer's thesis. Is he generous enough to admit that there are other views on this? Professor Miller says that the Caribbean black male is being marginalized. He has been feminized by all of these aggressive female figures around him. Mothers, aunties, grandmas, teachers who are mostly women. Good grief, even pastors who are women. Good heavens, these women are invading the church. What's happening? Yes. Okay. He says that these men have been increasingly feminized. Does he make a concession? He says many Caribbean black males have been fathered by their mothers or grandmothers. This is true. However, The absence of fathers and the small numbers of nuclear families did not seem to produce in earlier generations the levels of criminality, drug dealing, social alienation, and chronic wrongdoing prevalent among our young men today. Does he then show us exactly what his concerns are? Is he simply concerned about these dualistic, two-sided methods of child rearing that these powerful matriarchal figures indulge in? No. Does he nail it there? Is he concerned about? He says, well, it doesn't really matter, in the sense that, he's not concerned to critique single motherhood. Because he says, well, the truth is, for generations, young men in the Caribbean were fathered by their mothers. But we never saw the levels of criminality, alienation, etc. that we're seeing today. Is this a source and a cause for anxiety? Yes or no? Most definitely. How many of us highlighted that? Okay. So are we looking at some questions that I want you to do on this one? And they are pages 1, 2, and 3 of the booklet. Yes? Now this one is due Friday a week from today, which is, of course, the 4th. Yes? As I said, if you cannot come, it will be done for 4th October. If you cannot come to class, send it. I will not accept them after Friday. I don't care what's happening. Get my homework done. If you cannot come to class, send it. You will need the grade. You have been warned. Okay. Can we continue? So far, what have we noticed about Nettleford? Does he have this kind of semi-hilarious way of introducing important points, serious criticisms? In other words, does he leave us with food for thought even while making us laugh? Yes or no? Okay. What does he say then? In paragraph 4, does he give us another view of things? He says perhaps the differences we're seeing in how Caribbean men nowadays are functioning can be explained in terms of what? The environment. In other words, does the environment again become a metaphor? Remember the environment as metaphor in Miguel Street? It was an environment of poverty and underdevelopment, and did it have that underdeveloping influence on people's behavior? Yes. You are saying, Josh?
It also ties into how he associated men and women with animals, in, like saying that it was really better in an actual rural environment, not bulls and heifers are designed to be in a city.
They're not designed to be in a city. So maybe if you're going to treat men and women, young men and women, as growing bulls and heifers, that would work in an agricultural society. But since many of these Caribbean islands are transforming themselves into small cities with what he calls rural underbellies, that concept, that self-image, which is rooted in an agricultural environment, will not work. When he talks about, yes, that's interesting if you look at the metaphors. When he talks about being small cities with rural underbellies, can we think of the Mercedes-Benz driving down the narrow road, and here are the chickens moving across and we stop and wait for them. In other words, we have the technology, we have the magic phones and the iPads and what have yous, and we have these computerized cars. But do we still respect our farming roots? The chickens are there, we wait for them. Yes? The iguanas are passing, we wait for them. Yes? The cows, the same way. Yes. We just accept that these are all part of the environment too. Does this make sense? Okay. But in paragraph 5, he makes the point that despite the fact that the young women, or maybe because of the fact that the young women are kept under such tight controls and given so little freedom, they are doing better academically. And does this then mean that they will have more bargaining power in the workplace? You've looked in a typical bank, a large bank. Have you noticed how many women are in not just the front desk positions, but in many very relied on positions? Girls are told, stay home and do the dishes, look after your little brother, iron the school uniforms, clean the house, cook the dinner, and do your homework. You have a magic wand, you're going to do all of this, right? Do the girls obediently do it? Are the girls learning a skill that will help them through life and will help them career-wise? Time management. And what's the other skill? Self-discipline. Order. Yes? And of course, the girls who do not conform to this standard of perfection are punished by not only the mothers, but are they punished by society? By being stereotyped as what? SLUTS, a word, no, I'm deadly serious, a word we never use in regard to men. Have you noticed? And yes, and then there's a word that begins with W, yes, and so on. Yes. Are these words that reinforce stereotypical versions of what a woman should be? Yes or no? And are they used to punish women who do not conform to these versions? Of course. Okay. On the other hand, are the young men getting this dangerous freedom, which actually does not help them? But ironically, as he shows in paragraphs 5 and 6, throughout the Caribbean, the leadership positions are still primarily held by men. Yes? Okay. And the women themselves support this irony. A man must be allowed to be a man. Men suffered enough in slavery. Didn't women suffer too? And of course what? They are the ones who provide the support systems that help the men to achieve power and stay in power. It's an interesting irony, isn't it? He makes that point in paragraph 6. Then, of course, he says, but here the definition of manhood turns on sexuality. Is he making a criticism of how we define manhood? We define manhood in terms of sexual behavior, not in terms of values or virtues. Now, those of us who are doing English 211 notice that in terms of Greek and Roman mythology, as well as early British literature, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, there were many, many stories about who a hero was. A hero was physically strong, but a hero had courage, self-discipline, and faithfulness to his word. His promise was his bond. Now, are these qualities of sexuality, or are they qualities of the mind and the spirit? The mind and the spirit. So you notice those cultures then were hammering home to people through their mythologies that a true man wasn't just a person who was physically strong. He had courage, which was not and is not just a physical quality. And he kept his word. His word was his bond. He was faithful to his mission. And even if the mission was given to him by an invisible God, he was faithful once he gave his word. And so on. He was determined. He had tenacity. Monsters, dragons, nothing would stop him. Not even beloved women, as in the Aeneid, Virgil's Aeneid, the Odyssey, known in other terms. Okay. So, what are we looking at then? Is he giving us a critique of the values that are texturing the behavior and the self-images of the Caribbean man as he sees these things? Yes. Okay. So, are we going to do my quiz on it? And are we spending time on this essay? No. Precisely because we have echoes of some of our male characters. Is Mr. Hat at the back of our minds when we read this one? Okay. So we've done the register. Have we done everything? Yes? Okay. Thank you very much. And we know where we're heading now. Yes. And I'd like my homework, please. Yes. Who is going to collect? Will you, dear? Collect on this side of the room. Josh, will you collect on that side of the room? Bye, dears. I hope it helps. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Christina, how was that? Did you tie some loose ends together for you? Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, there.
Essay that we have to read, is it a critical essay or is it argumentative?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you see, for the essay, I was thinking about doing the first one, if they were doing the last week. But what I was thinking about doing is that I would be like on both sides. So
Josh, yes, of course. Okay. It a lot depends on how you define a hero. Yeah. How do we turn it up? Has it been working?
Put your password in.
Yeah?
Your password?
Has it been working?
I think so, yeah.
1 minute, please, Sarah. Okay, you think? Well, we'll find out in due course. What, you were taping it too?
I take mine on my phone. My iPad and I have.
But should you ask the speaker permission to tape first?
For personal use, do you? Normally, I was told no.
No. Who told you no?
The law.
Really?
Yeah.
As long as it's for...
Which
I don't know.